Can you hear me online? Oh, good morning, everyone. So the first talk I gave for the session, we talked about how when you open to your own suffering, you really have a choice whether you want to allow that suffering to soften your heart or harden it. It's really up to you. And our practice is about making that choice of opening to our suffering, and that our broken heart, we call that broken heart bodhicitta, awakened heart. And so I just want to continue along those lines. At our Zen center, I would say the kind of the milestones of Zen training starts with loving kindness. We start with meditation from the inside out. You start by being with yourself. That's the basis of the spiritual path. There is no other foundation. You have to start with yourself. The Dharma is not somewhere else. It's right where you're at. So you start with yourself, with kindness, with gentleness, or you try anyway. You try to be gentle. And then we learn about being mindful and how helpful mindfulness can be. And then really the first, I think, milestone in training is to come home to the body, to trust the wisdom of your body, and to be grounded in this embodied wisdom. Really important. And then we start to learn about the nature of reality, which we call shunyata, emptiness. The reality that we are not a separate self. We learn about ego, self-deception, our capacity for self-deception. And then we really begin to appreciate that this practice is living by vow, not living by your impulses, but living with an intention. And intention is everything. The commitment, nothing happens without a commitment. Everything follows from your intention. And our intention is to wake up, to practice this Bodhisattva vow. So, the Buddha made two really important discoveries. The first one was he discovered suffering. It's actually not a big discovery, right? But it was, because no one had ever actually named it, but it's the most obvious thing, that the obvious experience, existential condition of being a human being is that we're going to suffer. He called it noble. It was noble because he named it. So matter of fact. His teaching on the Four Noble Truths, there's no trace of morality here. He's not saying suffering is wrong. Just naming it, saying we all suffer. And then the other really important discovery he made was that if you, through using we might say a technique like mindfulness, you can, by being with your suffering, by being with your pain, you can be liberated from it. It's really counterintuitive. Being liberated from suffering is the path of a bodhisattva, living by vow. You begin to be with your suffering and your broken heart. And that takes courage. That takes bravery. And I think when we talk about bodhisattvas, I think we kind of have a stereotype of what a bodhisattva is. They're a very peaceful person, calm. They never get in fights or arguments. They never cause any trouble. They don't rock the boat. They don't even get into good trouble. They just don't get into trouble at all. So peaceful. So I'd like to present another possibility for what a bodhisattva is. And in the Shambhala tradition of one of my teachers, Trungpa, speaks of it as a spiritual warrior. Being a spiritual warrior is the same thing as being a bodhisattva. So yes, bodhisattvas are compassionate. Yes, bodhisattvas are loving. But bodhisattvas are also brave. A spiritual warrior is not someone who hurts people, not someone who inflicts violence over their enemies. Spiritual warrior is someone who's not afraid of themselves. You might think that would be so obvious, but actually it's not. The ground of practice for a spiritual warrior is really a fear. Because the spiritual warrior is practicing being fearless, but to be fearless, you have to be close to fear. That's what it means to not be afraid of yourself. But actually, we are. We're afraid of our pain. We're afraid, period. We have all kinds of insecurities, neuroses, feelings, strong emotions. We're afraid we're going to be found out. We're afraid we're not going to be up to the challenge of life. We're afraid we're going to be found wanting, that we're going to fail. We're going to say the wrong thing. We'll be politically incorrect. There's so many things to be afraid of. And so the path of a bodhisattva, the path and the practice of a spiritual warrior is to be with my fear. So what is fear? What is fear? Let's go into it. We don't want to go into it. We don't really want to look at it. We've got all kinds of ways of distracting ourselves, all kinds of ways of entertaining and being frivolous, and just, we don't want to go there. So, fear Fear, as far as from my own experience, fear is a kind of anxiety, nervousness, feeling ungrounded. Fear arises when we're not in sync with the body and mind, when we're not grounded in our embodied awareness. Then something comes out of left field, and it's a kind of bewilderment and confusion that strikes us, and we feel overwhelmed by that experience. And rather than be with that, we go somewhere else. We do something that we have all kinds of coping strategies for bewilderment, because it's generally not real pleasant. So to be with our pain, that requires courage. That requires a lot of courage to really be with your pain, not run away, not, yeah, you're having a shitty day. You're having a shitty day. You watch too much of the news. You read the morning paper. You've been on social media. Everyone's happy. How come you aren't? The world is full of violence. It's mean-spirited. It's a jungle out there. Just open your what's one of your social media accounts, and you know someone's going to be selling you a keto diet in the next 5 minutes. So they're going to sell you something. It's corruption. People being immoral, mean, violent. And yet, it is possible in your dungeon of darkness to notice, just to notice that is paradoxically, there's a possibility you could cheer yourself up just by noticing it, because you're that honest. You're being that honest with yourself to acknowledge your shitty day, and you could actually find some humor in it because you have enough dignity to actually be with it. And that is something. You could cheer yourself up. It's possible. That's what a spiritual warrior might do. That's what we aspire to do. It's an aspiration. To be with pain. Well, that's what compassion is about. It's about being with pain, being with suffering. A lot harder than loving kindness. Loving kindness, that's good. It's a good start. Be kind and gentle with ourselves and others. But compassion is about being with pain. And you got to start with yourself. There's no possible way you're going to be with other people's pain if you can't be with your own. So you begin to discover, you make discoveries on this path, that there is this reality that we are incarnated into. This world is sacred. There are no objects here. We're not an object. We belong here. This world is sacred. You see it if you're sitting in retreat like this. You start to get a sense of that spaciousness. You don't own your suffering. You're just suffering. It's not yours. You don't have to take it personally. We could have true, Roshi Jun talked about emotions the other day. We could have true emotions. Just have the emotion, just have the anger. Let it be pure, pure anger, pure jealousy. Just be pure. Just let yourself have it. Why are we struggling and fighting with our pain? Just have a true emotion. True your emotion. No sentimentality there. No story. No memory, no history. You don't own it. And I think what we discover when you start to get a sense that there's something here that is really sacred, that you are a part of this, that you have this richness, something in yourself that's fundamentally good and sane. The Dharma is sane. You've heard the Dharma. You appreciate the Dharma because it's so down to earth. And it's trustworthy. We have a saying in Zen, there's nowhere you can spit. This world is sacred, and we're part of that. So you have this, you start to have some sense of, you have some sanity and richness in yourself that you could be proud of that. You could be a dignified human being that actually is brave enough to be with your pain. You don't have to make excuses for your neurosis. You don't have to go to a priest and confess your sins. Just be sinful. Really do a good job of it. Really go all the way. Just, if you're going to fail, just really fail. What are we afraid of? We're afraid of failing. Afraid of not looking good. There's no audience. Isn't that a play? This is our life. But when we aren't authentic with ourselves, we feel like we're kind of playing somebody. We're kind of like a caricature of ourselves. And I think when you start to get what the path of a bodhisattva is about, it is about being yourself. All the way. Not just when you're with other people, but when you're alone with yourself, being yourself. Yeah. We're not putting on an act. This is not a rehearsal. And don't we all long to be that authentic self, to really be ourselves? Isn't this what we're wanting? So the path of the bodhisattva is you're willing to be honest, really honest with yourself. And you can feel proud about that. There's some dignity in that. There's some dignity in the fact that you're sitting here in a retreat. You're not running away. You're sitting with the pain, sitting with the discomfort, sitting with the anger, sitting with your fear. No one's going to save you. By the time you have your big opening and you want to go tell your teacher's died. They're no longer here. You stuck with yourself. It's up to you. You have this richness. That's what the teaching is. You are the Bodhisattva. You are a spiritual warrior. Face your fear. Be with your fear. Be big enough. You are big enough. You're rich enough, strong enough. You have the capacity. You love the Dharma. You give everything to the Dharma, and the Dharma will give you mountains and rivers and oceans and prairies. There's nothing here you need to defend, no territory you need to protect. What are we defending? What are we afraid of? Well, we're afraid of death. That's what we're afraid of. That's the setting sun vision. Setting sun vision is terrified of pain and suffering, does everything it can to avoid it. Living in a dungeon. Drinking, taking drugs, getting crazy, going to parties in dark dungeons and bars and getting drunk and dancing wildly. This is like there's no dignity in that. And we're gonna bond through our wounds. So there is a tendency when we try to be on this path to be hard on ourselves. So I think it's really important to emphasize that a spiritual warrior is we're working with our own arrogance, our own brittleness, the ways that we are not honest, the ways that we are capable of being hypocritical and deceiving ourselves and others, and trying to be honest, trying to be sincere and genuine as we are. No one does it perfectly, but you have the intention, and the intention is everything. Having the commitment is half the path. If you have the commitment to live by this Bodhisattva vow, then you can do it. People have done it before you. We have the teachings here laid out. We have heard the teachings. We can feel some joy and gratitude that we've even heard these teachings in our lifetime, that there is a path to freedom, a radical path to freedom that consists of serving others. So in a way, we're kind of preoccupied with ourselves, and when we step on this path and commit to giving everything to the Dharma, it's like you kind of turn like this. You're sort of looking. It's not that you're not being with yourself, but you're not preoccupied with yourself in the same way. You're not so worried about your inadequacies. You accept them. It's part of. You have some patience with suffering. You have some patience with samsara. You know the world sucks. And you don't buy into that. But you're also not, it doesn't take you down in the same way. You can be patient with other people's pain because you're patient with yours. You're gentle with yours. That's the point. And that's bodhicitta again, comes back to your sad and tender heart. You have that, and you have the basis for being a spiritual warrior. And then your practice is being with your own fear, seeing it, looking at it, examining it, seeing if it's really as big as you thought it was. You know how that is if you've ever had to give a big public talk or a performance and you felt nervous before you did it, and then you get on the stage and you forget about the fear goes away because you're doing it. You find yourself doing it, and everything's fine. So the path in the Shambhala tradition, they speak of this path as the Great Eastern Sun, the path of the spiritual warrior. And the sun is that it's the sun. It's like the morning, the dawn, before the sun comes up. It's a beautiful time, kind of time of day that's quiet, beautiful, full of possibilities, a kind of freshness, looking to the east. So full of possibilities, full of potential. And based on being a dignified human being, being upright, cheering yourself up from your own dark dungeons. We have them. Being able to have some good cheer and find a little humor in your own misery. It's possible. Not always possible, but sometimes it is. Bernie Glassman said, just, look in the mirror every morning and have a good laugh. Can't always do it. You can't always do it. But the intention makes it possible. The intention, the commitment, chanting that Bodhisattva vow, and then you find yourself living it more and more. You find that you can actually do it. You have the capacity to be larger. You're not so small. You're not who you think you are. Forget about who you think you are. Forget yourself. Dogen Zenji said, study Buddhism is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. That's not so easy to do. That's why we practice. So maybe we could have some discussion about this, about what gets in the way of being a warrior, how hard it is to be a spiritual warrior in these times, and why it's important that we find a way to stand our ground, find a way to make good trouble. I think the stereotype we have of a bodhisattva is not helpful. Someone that's just always peaceful, doesn't rock the boat. We need courage today. We need bravery. We need to stand for what is true and meaningful and dignified. And when you behave that way, you encourage others to behave the same way. We need more role models for people that are like that. So, any thoughts, questions? Any thoughts, questions? Yeah.
I would say that you have outlined a really marvelous path, incredibly challenging, too. So, my question is, how do you transform or cope with failure if I was thinking about what you said about self-deception, that our capacity for that is strong. And I would say that my capacity for that is strong. I would affirm that observation. And so if you've met your greatest fear is failure, and however you define it, you've experienced that. How do you transform that particular dilemma?
The question is how you transform your failure or your capacity for self-deception or failure. Well, failure is a judgment that you're superimposing on yourself based on the culture, some expectation you have of how you're supposed to be, and people aren't supposed to fail. But if you actually think of how human beings are, creative human beings often fail a lot. Entrepreneurs that become rich often have failed in their business horribly before coming back a second or even a third time and becoming successful. So I think we have this idea in the culture that we're supposed to be perfect, or we have this very high standard that we think we're supposed to live up to, and if we fall below that, then we've failed, or we've come up short. But I think again the idea here in terms of practice is that you don't really want to look at it. I think that's part of the problem, is that we're not encouraged to look at it. It's just a failure, and then you just accept it without any. I think mindfulness allows you to sort of notice, gee, that was really difficult. That was difficult, and I failed in some way in my job or in a relationship, and it's really painful. And I don't think there's a how to do it other than you have the intention to do it. It doesn't mean that you won't feel pain at the failure, but it means you're looking at it with kindness. I think the compassion is being with the pain. It doesn't mean you're going to fix it. It doesn't mean it was a good thing that it happened. But you're not judging it in the same way. You're just being with it empathically. It's like, oh, that sucked. That was hard. And I didn't do well there. I regret that. And that's all true too. But you're not fixing yourself in the same way. It's not like I have to fix that in order to be myself. That's just comes with life. We fail sometimes. And I think that goes a long way, because you don't personalize it in the same way. Suffering is empty too. So you don't have to hang on to it in the same way. It's not, I'm not saying this is easy, but I do think it is the path of waking up, is being able to have the courage to be honest with ourselves. And I think the practice gives us the capacity to have that courage, because that's what the teachings are inviting us to do. If it was easy, we wouldn't have to practice doing this. So But I think even the Buddha had suffering, and part of what he discovered was that by being mindful, by being with the suffering, not running away from it, you can heal. It's not as bad as you thought it was when you're curious about it and you have it in a way that's kinder, less judgmental. That makes sense? Yeah, so.
That was such a great question, Sky, Jigen. Well, I was just thinking, when I fail, there's a fear that arises, right? Like, oh my God, what's going to happen now to me because I failed? So, as I was talking yesterday, I think this is a great opportunity to get into the body and see what's tight and just breathe with it. Because failure is such a great teacher, right? Because there's a wisdom with that failure that we just can't see at the moment. So it's just because of the big, fear response, which also affects the brain, right? Like anger, right? So just breathing and like being kind, that's being kind, pausing. That's the practice of self-kindness. Breathing and then calming down. And then you can see a little clearer. Okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? Things are not, falling apart, or maybe they are, and I have to do this, So, yeah, because our practice is not thinking about the body, it's trying to solve it in our head. And, we have to kind of drop down into the body.
It's hard to be patient with those kinds of things because we get taken down by something, and then you want to kind of react, and you might, and we do react. We actually don't handle these things so skillfully, but with time, you can sort of have another perspective on it. You might even, and this is not uncommon, that the things that you thought were horrible turn out to be some of the greatest teachings when you reflect on them over, a longer period of time, and you have some perspective on it. You realize that in that time in your life when you were really stressed out and struggling, that you learned something valuable that you didn't realize at the time, but you know it later when you reflect on it. So what seems good might be bad. Like you win the sweepstakes and you think, wow, I'm rich. But you might be suffering from then on, and you might be really poor and miserable, but that might be good. I mean, the way we interpret things, the way we frame things changes the whole situation too.
So I have a question, maybe it's more regarding like the relationship and fear. So like how to deal with fear, on one hand, the fear of connection and maybe a fear of abandonment when there is another person waiting for the decision, and how to be true to yourself with exploring that fear when you know it's going to affect someone else, your decision on this.
Oh, that's a good question. That's a tough one. That's a tough one because we give away our, we want to please other people in a way that's usually not helpful. So it's very hard to trust ourselves in a relationship. But I think generally when you trust yourself, things go better. It doesn't mean it'll necessarily go smoothly. But if you're doing things to please somebody else, then you've already kind of lost your own ground. So I think, and this is why relationships are so tricky and difficult, because we do have fears of being rejected by someone we love, but then you put the wrong foot forward, because then once you are trying to please the other person, you're kind of codependent in a way that is based on fear. And a relationship that's based on fear is not going to be a happy one. So I don't have an easy answer for that because, you know, I don't know what your situation is, and I don't want to be presumptuous at all. I understand that relationships are, you know, minefields sometimes, and you have to, you know, you have to, in the situation you're in, you have to do the best you can, but I do think it helps to notice where the fear comes in and what does it mean to be abandoned, and why would someone abandon you if they loved you? Why would that? It's very hard to trust ourselves. That love doesn't really come from outside in that way. Love has to be here in our own heart, and a kind of trusting of that you are lovable as you are, and you don't have to prove anything. But that's part of the problem, is that if we have, and it's a psychological thing, if when we're young our parents don't love us in the way that we need, then we at a very early time in our development, you feel like you have to earn that love, and then that gets internalized as we grow up, and then you start thinking you have to earn that love from somebody else, and really that's not where it's at. It's about trusting yourself that you are already lovable, and I think that's the basis of this path, is that you are unconditionally worthy because you have this sanity in you already, and you don't have to earn that, and no one can give it to you. You have to have it for yourself.
And you know, like, I think I'm on that path because I started to understand that love is not something earned, but it's within. It doesn't have to have a structure. And actually, my son, who is 4, helped me because he picked one of the tiles that he plays with, and there was an ant, and he said, "Oh, I love Mr. Ant," and my mind went like, "Why?" And he's looked at me like as if I was like from a different world, and he's like, "I just love him." And that kind of rang the bell, but then I guess the fear and everything comes up after it. Like it's really hard to leave it and explore it fully when maybe I guess life in the past kind of said different. So it's kind of interesting how the 4-year-old can teach the adult this.
Kids could be brutally honest, you know. They could really be good teachers. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about the conditioning that probably many of us have, that pain is something or fear is something to take away from a person. Like you're caring for a person if they're sad or they're angry, scared, and you want to fix it. You're loving that person by doing that, and
Well, but that's not loving.
right. So I can see in myself and in people I've been around who are loving, they care about me, and even my husband. And I remember recently just waking up and I had a dream and I woke up really angry at somebody and just totally pissed. And then also just feeling a lot of pain within me. And he wanted to help me like get rid of it. And I said, no, I'm just angry and I'm in pain.
Mhm.
And this is where I am. That's how I woke up.
Mhm.
He texted our therapist. Cindy, Anne's having a meltdown, blah, blah. And this is someone who loves me dearly and doesn't understand, you know, it's just part of our culture that it's maybe,
Well,
it's scary
maybe-
to them.
Yeah, maybe your anger was scary to him.
Yeah, it's scary to them. And so some of I think of growing up is claiming our anger or our fear, and that's okay, you know,
Yeah.
to be with it. And she calls back and I said, I woke up angry, you know, and I'll deal with it. And she said, oh, okay. And it's, you know, people who are grieving, you know, people who are going through a lot of pain, people say like stupid things that
Yeah,
try to take it away. So there's something in our culture too that you have to get over in I say like growing up, being awake, that these are emotions are okay. They're not dangerous. Fear is not dangerous to me. And that requires work sometimes for me to just say it's okay to be that way right now in myself, you know, not acting it out towards other people. But we have this sense that we got to fix people when they're feeling bad.
Well, we all know what that's like, that kind of knee-jerk reaction. We want to fix somebody because we're feeling uncomfortable, and it makes us feel better if we fix them. But the whole, again, the disciplined practice of bearing witness is to be on the same level as whoever you're with. And if they're suffering, then you're suffering with them. That's what compassion is. But it's not about, nobody needs to be fixed by anybody. But there's also gender stuff. I think for women to be angry in our culture is more threatening often to men because it's a gender thing. Women aren't supposed to be like that. And so men get really upset when women are angry. And it's like, what? And they have really derogatory words for it too, you know. It really puts you down, you know. But so I think there's also that when women are angry, men get upset. But somehow it's okay for men to, like, you know, have a hissy fit. Sometimes when I'm doing work for the Zen Center and I've done something, June will come into my office and ask me to do it differently. I have a hissy fit. I get all upset, you know, and I'm just like, and then I don't even know who I am. Oh, who is this person that showed up? Because she just asked me to do a simple thing, and it's like, I don't know what that is. I lost control or something, and I just become a different person. I don't even know who I am, and then I get over it, you know. I say, wow, why did I have that reaction to and I'll go into June and apologize and say, oh yeah, I can do it, just you know, I'll get over it. But anytime you have that kind of strong reaction, it's a sign that something got triggered in you. And you know, but you could laugh at it too. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. You say, gee, that was I really don't know who I am when I'm in that place. I just lost myself completely. We all do it. Yeah. June can test, she's gonna. It's dangerous.
Yeah, I just walk out of the room. Again, sometimes I slam the door. But that's kind of an interesting thing, right? That it's a cultural thing that you're not supposed to have these intense emotions, but it's life. We're human. It happens. And I think really a healthy thing in working with emotions is realizing that it's okay to be angry, and you're working it out. You're taking the time to say, okay, I'm really angry right now, and it's not bad. It's not a bad thing if you don't do anything stupid, but if you can just be with it, what a great way then to watch it transform and see, wow, I can have these. I'm human. I'm not this bodhisattva, this quote, ideal bodhisattva that people have in their minds that's not supposed to get mad or not supposed to be sad or not supposed to be mean. Sometimes we are, but, it's life. That's what happens. So it's just how we work with it and how we can be kind, maybe not in the moment, but certainly soon afterwards.
Any more questions, thoughts? Anybody? Okay. No questions? Okay, so I guess it's time for lunch then. Thank you.